So once again, we are. I'm Corey from the Skeptical Leftist channel, and
I'm Chris from
Yeah.
It Had to Be Said.
Yeah, and we're doing another collaboration on kind of a pop culture and anarchist leftist perspective of things.
Yeah. I really wanted to talk about like action movies, and I wanted to talk about it with you, Corey.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
I can start us off if you like.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, when I was a kid, especially, it seemed like all these action movies were about these like the principled, good-looking hero who like works, with the police, or maybe, without their approval, but still towards like a police goal, to stop crime or like foil an assassination attempt against the president. And, as a kid, this kind of thing is exciting, because you don't really have any politics. You just kind of go like, yeah, save the president. Yeah, that's
right.
what we should do.
The bad guys kill people and the good guys save people.
Exactly. That's the only way. But, it's when you're a little older, it gets kind of boring,
Yeah.
Especially now. And there are like action movies that go against, this grain, but I feel like there must be, there should be like more movies and series about villains and why they're not really villains or criminals and why, their actions are justified. I feel like we need more of that.
Yeah. Like, but not in a cliched way, right? Because there is like almost a trope among like some kind of like the serial killer genre, right? Where you try to you're like, oh, well, he was abused as a child and turned into a serial killer, and so we're supposed to empathize with him. But really, we still don't examine the systemic issues or the politics around it, right?
There's always systemic issues.
That's right.
We just kind of want to look at the gore or whatever it is. Now, obviously, we're not the first people to notice this kind of thing. I was thinking I could read out this thread by like a major author in this field named G. Willow Wilson. So I read this, she says, and as someone who spent their entire career in the trenches of how do we keep the tension between good guys and bad guys interesting, I have some thoughts, and that's what I want to read out. Because It says, as you can see, Vince Gilligan, who wrote Breaking Bad, I think, or directed.
Okay.
I'm not really sure. I don't know all the details, but he did Breaking Bad. He says writers should cut back on villain stories because they've become aspirational. So Walter White's being celebrated, and like that's a problem. So first, if it's easier to write relatable villains than relatable good guys, that means something and should be considered as an independent question, right? Why have villains become so popular in recent decades? Because they reflect people's lived experiences within a broken system.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to start. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, I think that it's pretty dead on. Like, you could even look at the example of Walter White, right? Like, literally could not afford healthcare within the American system, and so turns into like a drug dealer. And like, you're supposed to see him as like a bad guy, I guess, but his brother-in-law, the cop, is the guy that I hated the most in the whole show.
Yeah. That's right.
No, it rings really true to say like that villains are more relatable because they're just like the rest of us who are suffering under the hands of the powerful in a variety of ways.
Yeah, like that's, of course, that's the one good thing from that point of view about Breaking Bad, that at least we know his origin story. It's relatable, it's understandable, right? He's not just evil or something like that.
I guess in a sense, it also makes me think of like, and a lot of people have talked about Black Panther, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely getting into that. Yeah.
So it makes me think of that, like the character who at the start you're like, oh, this guy's just a bad guy, but then you learn his backstory and like, not just a bad guy. Maybe he's reacting in a way that not everybody can live with, but like he's definitely not just a bad guy.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about Black Panther, and he's Killmonger's a good example of a villain in that way. Yeah. Yeah, especially at the beginning of the movie, because you think like he's talking about how these empires stole all this stuff from native people and Africans around the world, right? And like and so you kind of wonder where that's going to go.
Right.
And you can see he's like the bad guy, but it's like for good reasons.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I'll come back to that.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
Definitely want to come back to that. Let's see. Conversely, why have good guys become so cringe, so unrelatable, so one note? Because good guys are historically portrayed as rule followers, law abiders, both sidesers. For the last few decades, that means that the good guys end up defending the same broken system that produces the villains. If you want to write heroes in the year 2025, you have to decide what they stand for and then stand for it. The mealy-mouthed, offend no one approach no longer works. People respond to the Walter Whites because you can put truth in their mouths. So put truth in the mouths of the good guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this last point I think is important too. This is easier said than done, by the way, because the default position in US culture is still that a hero is someone who doesn't offend anybody, who isn't political, and whose ideals are conveniently abstract. Truth and justice and the American way, and so on, right?
Right.
No one thanks you for writing a hero with opinions. Ask me how I know, because that's what she does.
I'm a big Captain America head. Like I wrote, like, I haven't published it anywhere yet, but I've written like a huge essay defending Captain America from a leftist perspective. And my whole point ultimately boils down to the fact that he is somebody who, while his values are like truth, justice, and in the American way, he actually does hold values and will stand up to a government or a status that doesn't also uphold those. So like relating to the movies, Captain America in, say, one sense is like really status quo, but then in like Winter Soldier, he pushes back and he fights against the system in defense of his friend and what he believes is truth and real and right.
Okay.
So yeah, Captain America is my guy in a way,
even
though America sucks. And
yeah, I'm not sure. I have the feeling Captain America was always sort of supposed to be that way, like very American, but in the principled sense rather than in the do whatever the government says.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
That impression. Yeah, but I don't know because I haven't seen many of them. These Marvel. Again, I was going to get to it, but these Marvel movies, like they're so unsatisfying.
Yes,
almost all of them.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, it always does boil down to, it all just worked out in the end because of good vibes and the system. Whoever, it was just a corrupt person in the system. It wasn't the system itself.
Yeah.
So yeah,
exactly. And of course, people do believe that, right? They often think that, oh, we just need to get rid of this person or that person. Trump is the obvious thing. We got to get rid of Trump and then things will be better.
Right.
But it's so much more than that.
Yeah, it's always this is not who we are kind of idea, right? Like, of course, this is who the country is. Like, that's what a nation state does, right?
Exactly. And of course, that kind of thinking that this isn't who we are, it really does mean that all we need to do is like change this person or put a different party in power or a new law. And then, we'll be back to who we really are.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to apologize in advance to anybody watching if I missed the point of any of these movies that we're going to talk about. I think I probably will at some point.
Sure.
People in the comments should feel free to correct me, especially on specific movies. So yeah, I guess to reiterate, most of what we think of as the classic action movies suffer from what I would say are two major flaws. The first is an antagonist that I don't really care about, like a cop or a soldier, people who are fighting for an authority that I don't respect,
Right.
I don't agree with their goals or their struggle, so why would I support them?
Yeah.
Like, you should just let those guys go. Why don't you just let them go? You know, they're just normal people. Like, leave them alone, you know?
Yeah. If your hero is a cop, you're already off on the wrong foot, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And there are like, you know, like you can enjoy those movies, but like, but it's just a little bit harder, you know? Like, have you seen Colors with about the cops in LA?
Oh,
It,
probably a really long time ago.
yeah, it's an 80s movie.
Yeah.
But you know, and it's okay, you know, but basically it's kind of about these, I think Sean Penn and Robert Duvall, I think, are these two cops like in LA, you know, in gangland and all that. And I'm
Mm.
just there like, just decriminalize drugs already. You could
Yeah.
wipe out all of these problems
Yeah.
in one fell, or you know, so much of it in just one
Yeah.
fell swoop. Anyway.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like you say, like so many of the problems within, and obviously Colors isn't the only one that deals with this.
Hardly.
Uh
Yeah.
it's because it's a drug war, or it's because of black market this or that. And it's like, well, so if I could buy, you know, cocaine or heroin down the street at the store, we don't have a black market anymore.
Yeah, exactly. No more gangs.
Yeah, no more gangs, no more
More
exploitative
illegal.
system on that in that
Yeah,
way anyway.
exactly. And I mean, you know, the people in power know that, but they don't. They never say that in the movies. So,
Right, right.
so
Yeah,
nobody
for
else needs
sure.
to know. And then like it's okay to make a movie where the main character is like deliberately like a horrible person, or maybe becomes a bad person, you know, like Breaking Bad, like Falling Down, maybe, you know,
Oh,
like
yeah,
an
yeah.
average Joe who becomes like a killer or something. Like it's
Right.
pretty bad. I mean, just not just an average Joe, because he did kind of have a history of
Yeah, he was
um
kind of just a bad person in general anyway.
when he snaps, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then there's other movies like in different genres. Have you ever seen I Care a Lot? Have you ever seen that?
That doesn't even ring a bell. I don't know what that is.
It's I forget the name of the actor. The woman from Gone Girl. And she's just this horrible person. and I found the movie very successfully made me hate her. You know, like I
Okay.
just hated her. I just wanted to strangle her the whole movie, you know?
Right.
And I was like, well done, movie, because that's exactly what you wanted to do. It was clear.
Yeah, yeah.
So that can be a good movie. But if you're like a US soldier in Iraq or something, I
Right.
hope you lose. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. I guess in a sense I'd like yeah, like we already kind of mentioned the cop thing. One of my favorite movies is Heat, right?
Uh-huh.
But the main cop is Al Pacino, and he's like never at home. He's got multiple ex-wives. The only person he seems to care about is his stepdaughter. And like he's not a great dude just in real life. All he cares about is catching bad guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he'll do whatever it takes. He'll sacrifice anything in his personal life, anything around him to do that. He'll fire guns off in public randomly.
Might hit the bad guy.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's the kind of character that I think of when I'm thinking of like this guy that I love Al Pacino. I cannot empathize with that character.
I guess he's a Dirty Harry type.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which you're just a bad cop who's allowed to shoot whoever you want.
Just kind of gets away with it.
Like,
Well, he gets results, you see.
right,
So,
right. And by results, that means just a bunch of dead people who have
Yeah.
never undergone trial or
Exactly.
been read their rights in any sense.
And I often wonder, like, if that's. I mean, I'm sure not all of them do, but so I would think so many cops like kind of want to be that guy because they, you know, they're taught like to care about like getting that, you know, getting that kill or whatever, you know, getting
Yeah.
that guy, and it's like, you know, you can even kill him like if you need to. You can even like drive really fast through an urban area, you know, and possibly kill people that way as long as you get the guy, you know. No
Yeah.
one's allowed to get away with defying us.
That's right. And and we do see that multiple times, people getting hit by cop cars in high-speed chases. Like, it's super dangerous to do that shit, and they still do it, right? Like, not a non-zero amount of times every month or year, right? I think of like the cops that put the Punisher sticker on their cars and shit, and like,
clueless.
Yeah, like you can debate the merits of the Punisher in one way or another as a character, but like, that just means they want to murder people, right?
I think that's what they're saying. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
you're entrusted with power that we don't grant average citizens. You're allowed to carry a gun, you're allowed to drive fast and catch bad guys, but you're going to use that power to murder people and break the law.
Exactly. I think that's the only reason they would want to aspire to be the Punisher, like, so that the rules no longer apply to them.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is righteous. Period.
Exactly. Yeah. And because I'm going after people that are deemed bad guys.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was actually what I was going to come to as the second point. But you've got the first one is, you've got this hero that I don't really consider a hero, and the people they're fighting I don't really consider villains.
Right.
It's often like people who are just like smuggling drugs or robbing a bank. Like, those aren't inherently bad things, Right. Like, it kind of depends. Like, if you start shooting people while doing it or something, then that's a different thing. And of course they often do.
Yes.
So that they're the bad. So they're clearly the villains, clearly the bad guys.
Yeah. I know you said you haven't watched a lot of like the Marvel stuff. I'm a big nut for this stuff, but so in Falcon and Winter Soldier, there's a group called the Flag Smashers, and their whole thing is that they're, after everybody came back, because if you don't know the backstory, like, everybody went away and then came back through various mechanisms. Snap. That's right, his snap, and so everybody came back, and all these people were suddenly displaced. They weren't allowed to live where they were living. They were moved into social housing or group housing or no housing. And so this group, the Flag Smashers, they kind of came together to be like, no, this is wrong, and we're going to go after the people in power and change this. And I'm 100% on their side the entire time, but then they kill some innocent people, or they put a bomb in a building where some orphans live or some shit. Right. And you're like, okay, so now you've crossed the line. That's what you're supposed to do as the bad guy, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And yeah, we can totally talk about more examples of that now if you like, but that's clearly a really good one. Yeah. These people who it's really hard to even to disagree with, unless you're really conservative or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Like you were saying, Black Panther, that was a really good example, I think. Because they've got this, he's got this great idea. Let's liberate people around the world from colonial oppression. Great. Yeah. Okay, let's do it. How are we going to do it? But then he like choked this woman, and it's like, you defy me. So,
we're gonna kill everyone.
And you're like, okay, that's why he's the bad guy. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's right. But then the state of like Wakanda or whatever, like they've got like a CIA agent that's on their side, right?
Yeah. It's like,
how can they be the good guy?
I know. I mean, I didn't think, it was only on like the far left where we think that the CIA is like these unaccountable asshole spies that like do really shitty things in the US and around the world. But
exactly.
No, sure, let's rehabilitate them for saving a Black African republic. That'll make them be there.
Which ultimately comes down to like, and because then the UN and all the European nations, they want the resources of the African nation, right? And they think that they should be able to legally force Wakanda to give up their vibranium.
Right.
So for all their help with fighting Killmonger and like they're trying to side with the CIA and whatever, they still end up being targeted for colonization and resource extraction by the rest of the powers that be.
And of course they would in any
Yeah,
real world, of
that's
course.
right. Yeah,
and
that's right.
and I suppose that might be why, maybe Killmonger was wrong for that reason. They should have kept it a secret. I don't know. Maybe it's more complicated than we're
Yeah, yeah.
Have you I haven't seen many of the X-Men movies, but have you seen X-Men Last Stand?
Yes, yes, I
Um,
have.
because I get the impression that Magneto has his kind of cool villain arc there too, right? That he kind of or maybe it's not that one, maybe it's before that.
Well,
But
yeah. Like Magneto is a cool villain. Like he
yeah.
just is, right? Like he's right. He's fighting for the liberation of mutants worldwide. He bans them all together, and he wants to give them a safe haven
Right.
wherever. And ultimately, yeah, like in Last Stand or even in other movies, like he becomes a villain because he's going to target like a variety of powerful people who like in the first X-Men movie, he's got a device that's going to turn all these powerful rich people into mutants.
Okay.
And like he's somehow the bad guy for that, while they're having these meetings trying to outlaw being mutants and putting on the mutant registry and whatever, right?
Yeah. That's of course that's one positive thing about the X-Men. It's always kind of been about, at least the comics. I haven't really seen the movies, but it's always kind of been about like anti-racism, sort of. It's been like kind of a clear allegory for like anti-discrimination of other kinds too.
Yeah, for sure. And that comes across in the movies as well.
Okay.
Because they have to hide because they're different and whatever, they're targeted based on their race. And yeah. So it is still in there, just still they defend the status quo. Like the X-Men still always end up defending the powers that be and like stopping you from killing the guy who's going to target everybody.
Yeah.
So
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that. There's a few videos. I'm planning to put the links in the description, but there's a lot of videos you can see that are kind of explain how, or not just videos, but like articles and stuff that I'd like to look at in a minute.
for
about
sure.
like how superheroes, that's their whole thing. They just kind of maintain the status quo. They're just kind of substitutes for authority.
Yeah.
Yep. Like the Avengers are kind of like if the US military had this unit of wizards for special ops or something,
Right. Yeah, like Shield, right? Like that's a branch of the US government, and particularly again in the movies, the Avengers just work for Shield, which means they just work for the government.
Yeah, Alan Moore has been interviewed a fair bit in the past like 20 years or so to get his opinion on Marvel movies and superhero movies. Alan Moore, I mean, you know who he is, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the Watchmen guy.
Yeah, he's actually an anarchist.
That's right. Yeah. And he had some just good to remind people. Yeah. He had some interesting thoughts about like superheroes and so on.
For sure.
In a couple of articles here. I said around 2011 that I thought that these movies had serious and worrying implications for the future if millions of adults were queuing up to see Batman movies. Because that kind of infantilization, that urge towards simpler times, simpler realities, that can often be a precursor to fascism.
Jeez, eh?
Yeah. He doesn't like pull any punches or whatever, right?
Like prescient. Like fully prescient. Like he knew what was going to happen.
And it's pretty interesting because like, it makes a lot of sense. You kind of you just want things to be simple. People, they a lot of people nowadays, they're obsessed with like crime, oh no, there's crime, so I'm scared. And they're and people in power are often just trying to stir that up. I heard that I haven't been paying much attention to the election, as I never do, but I heard Pierre Poilievre said something like, people in BC are afraid to leave their homes because of all the crime. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Because drugs are fully legal there. And now you can't walk down the street without watching somebody shoot up.
Yeah. I mean, to be frank, here in Victoria, it is pretty common, but usually they're not disturbing people. Like, they're not really hurting people. It's just some guy like smoking heroin in a doorway or something. Like, I feel bad for the guy, but like, we have to stop this? Who says we have to stop this?
He's not actually hurting anybody.
That itself isn't hurting anybody.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's the kind of thing that Batman wants to take us back to.
Yes.
You know, no criminals anywhere, so that the middle classes can walk safely through the streets without any disturbances.
And that's his whole thing, Batman. Like, again, I'm a big fan of these things. I love this comic book.
Yeah.
But Batman has always been about beating up street level thugs, you know, in retribution because his family was killed. Like, he occasionally will go after the big boss, but he spends his nights beating up random drug dealers and random guys on the street. Like,
yeah, he's got all this money.
Yep, that's right.
So many things he could do with it.
He could actually solve all crime in Gotham City.
Probably. Yeah. With $1 billion? Come on.
Yeah, shit, yeah.
And yet he's like, no, I'm buying this hotel or whatever. All right, fine.
Yeah, that's right.
It seems to just, you know, he's just another rich guy. He wants to get richer, you know?
Yeah.
But in the meantime, make himself feel better, right?
That's
Ease his
right.
conscience.
Yeah.
And of course,
the mission.
And I suppose maybe it's similar in a way. It's like analogous to philanthropy, when, you know, a rich guy goes like, I'm going to give money to some foundation.
Yeah.
And there I feel good about myself now.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When it's not changing anything.
Yeah, and in fact reinforces the way that things are. Like, if he spends, like, say Batman spends all his time beating up street level criminals and doesn't ever actually deal with the fact that the Falcone crime family runs the city.
Yeah.
Like, he's always got a perpetual enemy, and they've got a perpetual enemy that they can rally their troops behind and whatnot. Like, it reinforces the whole system.
It'll just be the fighting back and forth.
Yeah, that's right.
I was thinking recently too that most Batman villains seem to be like these 1920s alcohol prohibition era villains, you know? Like they're all white in like fancy suits, you know, they tend to be like Italian and stuff, you know, like I think they're really trying to take us back to the 20s with that.
Yeah, no, for sure. There's a lot of like, even without the campy guys, like, you've got your like very like mob-esque criminal element in Gotham, I guess.
Yeah. This is again Alan Moore. This is from a blog, but this is an interview with him. And he was, you know, we're kind of continuing on with the kind of precursor to fascism theme here, because he really noticed that. He says, primarily mass market superhero movies seem to be abetting an audience who do not wish to relinquish their grip on A, their relatively reassuring childhoods, or B, the relatively reassuring 20th century. The continuing popularity of these movies to me suggests some kind of deliberate self-imposed state of emotional arrest, combined with a numbing condition of cultural status that can be witnessed in comics, movies, and popular music, and right across the cultural spectrum. He says, I would also remark that save for a smattering of non-white characters and non-white creators, these books and these iconic characters are still very much the white supremacist dreams of the master race. I think, in fact, that a good argument can be made for D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation as the first American superhero.
Oh, jeez.
And the point of origin for all those capes and masks.
Wow. Yeah, no, he doesn't pull any punches there, does he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
And I think, you know, obviously today they can't, you know, be racist. And I mean, they're not racist. The creators they're not like, you know, they're not KKK or anything.
Right.
Like they, but it's the same kind of thing. They're still going after the criminalized like class of people.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
that's their target instead of the, the people with all the money and power, or the systems of power.
Yep, yep. I know. Yeah, like you say, like in the modern-ish era, they definitely have incorporated a lot more like people of color, women, LGBT
Yeah.
Q members into these superhero genres. But it's definitely still like got the male power fantasy and the helpless damsel in distress kind of stuff, and like there's still like there is still that master race kind of idea because these are the superior beings, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know it's kind of satire, but the boys kind of played on to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
where like Homelander was a fascist
Yeah.
because of his power and his belief that that made him superior in every way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, The Boys, of course, is good that way. It's showing kind of, it's like The Watchmen. It kind of shows what they would probably really be like.
Yeah, that's right.
There's also, I don't know if you've seen the Harry Potter movies or read the books.
Yeah, I've watched all the movies, but my daughter loved the books for most of her childhood. So
I was wondering, if because of your kids, you might know.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that's another kind of an example, just in a different setting.
Right.
It's still very much this pro status quo kind of thing, because you've got these kind of threats to the status quo, and that's the evil, right? These kind of, and they're so obviously evil that obviously you should oppose them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like they're wizard Nazis, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
But like once the wizard Nazis are gone, everything's fine.
There's still lots of problems with the system, right?
There are all these problems with the system, and we're like, yeah, but we're not,
we're not Nazis.
There's
right?
always exactly. We're not Nazis, so we don't need to change anything else.
Yeah, that's right.
Like there's so much that could be changed. And Harry becomes like a cop. He becomes a cop at the end.
Yeah.
He becomes an Auror, right? Which is like the FBI in the wizarding world. Basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't celebrate that.
Yeah, no, that's right. In fact, I would say that he went from being an innocent person who could help the world to being a bad guy.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And it seems like the point in a lot of these movies is just that don't try to change things.
No, that's right.
Don't go too far from the status quo. There's so many cop movies that don't necessarily sort of portray themselves as cop movies, but they are, and they really, again, it makes me think like, I don't care about your goal, and I don't disagree with the villains, a lot of the time, unless again they're just cartoonishly evil or something, right?
Yeah.
And so think Die Hard, right? Like, why should I care if these people are just stealing from some big corporation? Well, no.
Yeah, that's right.
Look at me. And it's like, and actually it's a pretty good idea, going like saying like, yeah, we want to free all these political prisoners, and then just robbing the place. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is, like, if they ended up just getting away with the money, then nobody would have been hurt, really, right?
Yeah,
like it would have been the end. The only person who's hurt would have been the company, which isn't a person, right?
And they're insured anyway. How much would they even really lose?
So, yeah. So instead, but you've got the cop, right? The semi-abusive cop who drinks too much and with a bad attitude, and he comes and saves the day with a bunch of one-liners and a gun.
Yeah. and as long as the status quo is restored, then
that's right. Yeah.
And I like the movie True Lies.
Oh yeah.
But it's another one of those ones, because like do you remember the bad guys? They basically want the US to stop occupying the Middle East and supporting Israel, and it's like,
this is a reasonable
demand.
You're not a bad guy, are you? Like,
that doesn't make you bad. And I wonder, like, what is the audience supposed to think? when they hear that, because these are obviously the bad guys,
Right.
and they're like, we want to end US imperialism. Like, that's how bad guys think. They want to stop US foreign policy.
Right.
That's what we're learning from that.
Because the US is the good guy.
Yeah.
So anybody who opposes that is the bad guy.
Anybody who works for them is the good guy. Hence,
right.
Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so even though he like interrogates his wife and stuff, like,
yeah, he drugs her, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, so well, he's a jealous husband, pretty
right.
toxic.
Yeah,
so,
which I mean, I get at that time was kind of more common. Like, it was considered okay that you were like stalking your wife, using your CIA, your spy tools to keep.
I guess, yeah. There were probably lots of guys watching that, like, yeah, if I had the power, I would do the same. Yeah. And so the main problem with the villains in True Lies, of course, there's two problems with them from the point of view of the audience. Right. One is their methods, that they I think they want to nuke like Florida or the East Coast of the US or something like that. So obviously that's bad.
Yeah, right? That's right. Lots of innocent people would die. So it's bad.
So that's bad. And number two, they're Arab. And of course, Americans are like, oh, well, those guys are clearly the bad guys. They just have to look at them to know that.
Right. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because that was also a thing at the time of that movie, was like a lot of bad guys were coded as Arab.
Oh, totally. Yeah. It was kind of, and it's interesting because, of course, after 9/11, everyone was like, oh, the Arabs are the bad guys. But even in the 90s, they kind of already were, because they had moved, it was no longer the Russians, and now it's the Arabs and the Muslims and stuff. And there was like the 1993, I think, bombing of the World Trade Center.
Yep.
It was like pretty big news,
Yeah. They didn't completely go down the way they did in 2001, obviously, but
it was a pretty big explosion.
It was pretty big. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was probably part of it. And probably they had already kind of been slowly making them the villains, because, in like the 70s, for example, there were a bunch of plane hijackings. Like a lot of them were by Lebanese and Palestinian groups, that kind of thing. So there was that. And so I guess that's where it comes from. But of course, it's easy to just go like, oh, yeah, those guys. Yeah. They're the bad guys. They'll be,
Yeah, for sure. The movie that comes to mind for me is The Siege, which like ultimately it was, I guess, kind of a takedown of like the military because of the way that it went. But like it was very much about like terrorists are brown people. Like that was the whole thing. And so we got to find these terror cells that are,
kind of a guilty pleasure of mine is Under Siege, because not just because it's a goofy action movie, but because it's Steven Seagal.
Yes, for sure. Who is fully like a wacky cop type guy anyway, right? Like,
oh, totally, yeah. And I just kind of prefer it to Die Hard, but it suffers from all the same problems.
Yeah, a little bit more, I guess, hand-to-hand combat based.
Yeah,
because
that was his thing.
But yeah, still very much like one cop who can take down this group of guys.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like any real, really successful action would have to be more than one person. Like it's cool in these movies, blah blah blah. But like, realistically, there isn't one person or even a small group that should have the power to do that. It should be like as many people as possible, working together. And then there's James Bond. Ricky Tarr says, like, I spent my childhood worried about the danger of mad scientists. Turns out they were the good guys. Mad about the real villains, racist billionaires.
Yeah, for sure.
And then someone replied to, you could do a fresh take on the trope to have the superhero fight to stop the mad scientist type, only to realize they've been duped into fighting for the bad guys. And so, the twist is they team up with the mad scientist and beat out, the rulers and the rich Nazis. Right?
For sure. Yeah.
That's where it could go. That's what movies we could have.
Yeah, that's right.
Have you ever seen Kung Fu Hustle?
It rings a bell, but I'm not sure I remember it too well.
About 25 years old now, I think. it's basically like a Hong Kong kung fu movie with, and it's got kind of like that surrealist kind of magic thing to it, and it's pretty cool. But what's great about it's basically this village is being threatened by kind of a gang, this like evil gang, right?
Okay.
And but they all have like these different kind of, they're all not all, but a bunch of them are like these experts at kung fu, and they've got, again, it's a kind of a magical power, so they've got these like different cool magic things that they can do, and so they all work together to fend off this gang. They protect their village together.
Nice.
And that's really cool. It's not just about that, because there's also like this kind of superhero kung fu master who comes and saves them, but aside from that,
no, that's cool.
I mean, there's got to be a climax, right? But
of course,
but like basically they're just kind of working together. They're underdogs, and a lot of movies get it. A lot of movies know we like underdogs. We want an underdog to win.
That's true. Yeah.
There's some things that I like about the Bourne movies. Similar Jason Bourne, because he's got he's kind of supposed to work for the government and stuff he doesn't agree with, but he gets hit on the head or whatever, and then maybe I shouldn't. He's given a chance to leave, sort of to think differently, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's and then because he doesn't really remember all of his stuff, right? Something like that. I don't remember all the details to that one.
Well, that's the thing. He's got amnesia, so he doesn't remember like his brainwashing, right?
But he's got all these skills from when he was a superhero special agent type. Yeah. So I can enjoy that. Like he was fighting against the government, right?
It's still fighting against the government. Yeah. Have you ever seen Equilibrium?
Does not ring a bell.
Oh, it's so good. Christian Bale.
Okay.
It's a sci-fi dystopia. They've had this like third world war, and it's devastating, and so they've kind of inferred that the way to stop war is by forcing everybody to take this thing that kills all their feelings. Basically, they have no feelings now.
We can't hate if you feel nothing, right?
Basically, yeah. And so they can't hate each other. They can't let their passions run wild or whatever. So they just kind of do what they're told to. But and Christian Bale is like the highest ranking cop in the whole system,
Oh, okay.
But he kind of comes to realize what he's doing is wrong. He kind of realizes he's a cop, and so he fights back against it. And it's like Bourne. It's cool because it's that's the plot, but it's also got really good like action, really cool fighting in it. That's
because I am a big fan of action movies, right? Like I love that shit. I just finished watching both seasons of The Punisher because I love the action and that stuff. But every time they talk, you're stuck with this sense that like, so you just like killing people and you need an excuse to do it. Like, so how am I can't really like emotionally side with the character because he's just doing wrong. And then there's just like the odd thing thrown in there to make you feel like he's a good person.
Okay. Like what?
Well, like there was a girl that he saved, or he went after like a guy who he like blew up a photo place where they took photos of children.
Oh, okay. Right.
So he blew that up, and he but he didn't shoot the guy who was doing the pictures. But he blew that place up. He left him. So
interesting.
Yeah, like so there's like little things where you go, oh well, he's got a moral compass at least, but then he just goes on a killing spree. And I think it was at the end of the second season, he just like he calls this meeting between these two gangs and just kills everybody that meets there. Like I don't know. That doesn't seem like the right thing to do to me.
Interesting. But yeah, that's another one of those really vigilante kind of things. Yeah. Because it's like being a cop, but even more so. Like you can kill all these people and not be held accountable for it.
Yeah, right? That's right. Oh. And even the way that the shows are framed, like, and you see it all over, like in variety of these things where like, the vigilante, like Charles Bronson or what have you, like you're supposed to root against the cops who are trying to catch that guy because he's doing what they should be doing.
Yeah, just
and yeah, I'm not pro cop in any sense, but like, why am I rooting for the vigilante who's just killing people?
Exactly. Yeah, they can both be wrong.
Yeah, that's right.
And then it's but if you feel that way, the movie's not as enjoyable. It's like, well, so who cares about them? Let them fight, you know?
Yeah, that's right.
I really enjoyed the second season of Squid Game because you know, kind of finally at the end, you know, they rise up. I was so happy. I was like, you know, I felt like my mind exploded at the end, you know, at the end of a whole season, really 2 seasons of watching them just take it, you know, and all of a sudden they start fighting back. I'm like, yes. Let's fight back. I don't even care if you guys win. I just hope you fight back.
Right on.
All I cared about in that moment. Yeah. And of course, that made me think of the book Blessed is the Flame.
Okay.
I don't know if you've read it, but
no.
Oh, you haven't? It's it's an anarcho-nihilist introduction to concentration camp resistance in Nazi.
Oh, interesting.
Nazi concentration camp resistance. Okay. It's such a good book. At the risk of like you know, oversimplifying, it's kind of about how the, you know, why people resist in such situations, you know, where you'll get punished for it, you know, even the people around you might get punished for it. Everything is, you know, it seems like there's no hope at all, but people still resist, you know. And that was kind of what I thought about when I was watching Squid Game season 2. I was like, I kind of think there's 2 other things. There should be more kind of anarchist or anti-fascist movies, and more movies about criminals, you know. So just criminals alone, like, there could be more of those. So, like, for example, have you seen Set It Off?
Oh, that sounds familiar.
4 black women start robbing banks, basically.
Oh, yeah, I have. That's from the late 90s, right?
Sounds right, yeah. And it's great because you see things from their perspective, and they're like fully fledged characters. They're cool characters. They've got cool relationships. It's not like they're just jerks and that's why they're robbing banks. They need the money, you know? Real pressures and stuff, you know. So like, so that's a good. I thought that was pretty cool, you know.
For sure.
You really, you I think it's easy to identify with them. You know, you just kind of go, well, if I was poor, if I needed it too, sure, why not? You know?
Yeah. Was there one? Maybe Dead Presidents was about the same kind of theme.
Yeah.
It was a good movie.
Yeah, I think that's the one with Chris Tucker and somebody else come back from Vietnam.
Could be. Yeah, I don't remember the details very well.
Yeah, I think. Lawrence Tate. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's basically what happens. Yeah. I like
kind of the same idea. Like they go out robbing and because they need the money.
I think that's what it was. Yeah,
I think so.
I like, you know, well, I actually I don't really like it, but I like the point of view in the movie Rambo because like, he's just trying to survive against like the cops who are chasing him for basically no reason. Right?
Yeah. It's been a while since I watched Rambo, but
well, of course, it's mostly just action, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I haven't seen the one where the Rambo movie where he goes to Vietnam, but apparently that kind of reverses everything and he becomes kind of this imperialist again. You know, he kind of goes into Vietnam and kills a whole bunch of Vietnamese people as if like for revenge.
Yeah, that's right.
And there are good like movies about Vietnam, of course, right? A lot of them, like you've got Apocalypse Now,
right?
Platoon, Born on the 4th of July, Full Metal Jacket, and even maybe Star Wars. You could argue.
Right? You could argue, yeah.
And I like those ones because they really question, you know, whether the U.S. was ever really the good guy, and maybe even if an empire could ever be the good guy,
right? Yeah.
And then you can contrast that with the movie American Sniper about Chris Kyle, which is like pure propaganda.
Yeah, that's right. Just drivel.
I read a little of the book for research purposes. I haven't really seen the movie, but I get the impression Chris kind of sees 9/11 happening. And then he goes, okay, well then obviously I should just sign up to do whatever the government tells me to do.
Right.
And and go off to war, not in any place related to 9/11, just whatever the state says, whatever my job is,
Yeah.
Like,
Which is I think that there is kind of a theme among a lot of like justifying soldiers going to like Iraq or Afghanistan. There's a lot of that same kind of theme. Like 9/11 happened, and so we joined the military to go fight against brown people.
yeah.
And it was like, yeah, like in movies and TV shows, I think you see a lot of that kind of same idea, that same justification.
It seems like they don't seem to care. Everything, all the violence that's actually around them, near them, like that doesn't seem to matter.
Right.
Like there's plenty of local violence, but it's like, why bother trying to solve that? That's normal,
right?
That's American or whatever. But it's not cool when foreigners,
right?
Brown foreigners try to kill our people.
Yeah.
That's different.
They've crossed the line. Yeah. That's right. And then of course, like you say, like these people that they go and they fight, they haven't had anything to do with 9/11. They're not the people that did it. And but somehow it's justification.
Exactly. I think we also need like more anti-fascist movies. All the anti-fascist movies we have are about World War II, which is cool enough. Great. Kill the Nazis, but what about today's Nazis?
Yeah,
want to kill them too. I feel like there must be a lot of potential there, just not for like out of touch, Hollywood people, maybe.
Right.
But there've been all kinds of like street fighting with fascists, like since like the 30s, basically.
For
right?
sure.
So, I mean, there's so much that could be mined for like cool stories about that. And I'm sure there are stories like being written or whatever along those lines, but not big movies, right?
Yeah, they're not going to be your blockbusters, right? And I'm sure, there's probably a lot of independent filmmakers or what have you that like have good ideas for that sort of thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, for sure. There's a movie called Skin by Daryl Lamont Jenkins. You probably don't know Daryl Lamont Jenkins. He's a pretty prominent anti-fascist organizer.
Okay.
And he's done quite a bit to actually kind of bring actual fascists like to kind of change their minds,
Right.
Like he's actually done that. So he's really
That is cool. Yeah.
And he made one or two movies. He was I don't know how much hand he had in making the movie Skin, but he's actually portrayed in it. Somebody represents him, but it's not really about him. That's the thing. There's not much kind of anti-fascism of any kind that goes on in the movie. It's more just about this neo-Nazi guy. His story more than anything. So it's not exactly like it is an anti-fascist movie, but not kind of obviously.
Yeah.
One cool movie that I would recommend, kind of like my last recommendation here, I'd say, is The East. Have you ever seen The East?
I have not.
Okay. It's about this anarchist affinity group.
Yeah.
And they kind of have this goal, this mission to I think they're gonna poison the people who were responsible for like some huge damaging ecological disaster that like hurt a bunch of people, blah blah blah. I think it's along those lines. I don't remember. I haven't seen it for a long time, but it's kind of from the point of view of like of some federal agent who like infiltrates them, who knows about them, but she kind of gets converted to their way of thinking. Eventually, she's kind of like, yeah, actually, and it's kind of a cool anarchist movie that way.
Cool.
Yeah. So
that sounds awesome. The East. I'll definitely have to check that out.
That's the name of the group. They just call themselves The East.
Okay.
And one thing I want to see, I want to see a Bono Gang movie, because I want to see anarchists driving around in the 1920s or 1910s, way back whenever it was, robbing banks.
Yeah, like there's I know I think Brenton Lengel wrote a Darude comic book. I would love to see that comic book turned into a movie.
Wow, yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of ground. Obviously, there's lots of examples of these movies. Like just about every movie with a cop in it is like,
Yeah,
fucked up in
we
some
could
way.
bring up.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. So
yeah, we need more movies where cops realize what they're doing is wrong and
quit.
And quit and work for community solidarity.
That's right.
Like that.
Yeah, like let's see more cops quit their jobs. That's what I want to see.
That's what I want.
So I'm the Skeptical Leftist on YouTube and podcast apps. I'm trying to get my Spotify numbers up, so go subscribe on Spotify. Even if you hate it, never listen, just go and click on the button.
Right on. And I'm Chris. Follow me either on Blue Sky at Anti-School Teacher, I think. That's not at Anti-School Teacher, but it is anyway. And on YouTube, It Had to Be Said.